Okay, this is Thursday, July 16th, 42action.com and .org. We're so glad to be back. This is Randy Shannon. I'm your host and moderator. And we've got a great call tonight. We're hoping. We're waiting for Andy to show up, and he should be here shortly. We've got Chris and Dave and Marcy and Tom, and there's several other people on this call. Sometimes Andrew, I see you in there. Thomas. So glad to have you guys on, and just make sure you guys are spreading the word about our calls. For the last couple of weeks, we did some things on the fundraiser. Tonight, we're going back to the law, back to our roots, and we do have a civil rights attorney. Dave, you might want to pop him off a text. We have a civil rights attorney that is going to be on our call tonight, and he is traveling around with a group. And Dave got to meet him up in Denver, Colorado over the last week, and he said we absolutely had to get him on the call. So we're excited to have him, and hopefully he'll show up here in just a moment. But he specializes in Title 42s, and boy, how wonderful is that? Because a lot of people on these calls want to do Title 42s, and sometimes we look for a good attorney that'll help. And the thing about Andy is he has been suspended, so he's super aware of the corruption, and it's the same corruption we're all aware of. So our call tonight is going to be a little bit different. Sometimes we shake it up on here. The first hour is going to be with Andy, and then we'll have him speak, and then we'll open it up to the guests. But then the second half, we're going to hang up on this call about 8:58 p.m. and give everybody a chance to go grab a quick drink. And then I'm hoping that you all get on the Republic call tonight, because they have several sitting, if I understand it right, politicians in the de facto that are speaking out about the corruption that they're enduring. And if you guys remember, I ran for state senate in Iowa, and I ended the campaign for getting into that zoo. I had already seen how bad it was going to be, and I was already being exposed to it and being told what I had and had to do to get people on my side. I saw how they were making their votes, sorry, I'm just getting a text here. Okay, got it. So I saw how they were having to vote. Like, you could vote for this because you're not up for re-election. Basically, the voters, they flat told us, have less than a 7th grade education level. So and it's funny because in the state of Iowa, 53% of their budget was towards education. So can you tell me? And I questioned that out loud in the room when they sent a guy from D.C. to talk to all of us Senate candidates and tell us that the people had less than a 7th grade education. It's alarming because it's their curriculum that the people are forced to take, and they know that people are at a 7th grade education. So do not think for one second that that is all not by design. That is absolutely by design. So, Andy, I understand you're on. I got a text. Okay, so I think you're on the wrong line right now. Hold on just a second, you guys. Let me make sure he gets the right line, because I don't have him muted, that's for sure. Bear with me. You sent a text. He is here, but he really isn't. I think he's on a different line. Okay. Come on this line. I think he scrolled too far down in the message. Okay, so I want to make sure that everybody hops over to that Republic call if that interests you at all. And these guys are going to be talking about a missing amendment, I understand, and they're going to talk about the corruption that they're exposed to. And that's what we're going to have Andy on here about. If you want to follow him, he's on Facebook, Ostrowski.com, and he's under that name as well on Facebook. And he's going to be running for U.S. House. He's been suspended on his bar license, which, Chris, you can talk to him once he gets done with his story about why that's really not that big of a deal. And then the last part, I definitely want to open it up to questions, you guys. And I understand he's still been taking on cases and practicing, his trade and helping a lot of people. So he's very well, of course, of the 12B6s, so I want to make sure that we pin him down and if we have time to have him talk about that as well. So let's see here. I think he's still not moving over.
That, Randy?
Yeah, he's texted me, and I'm texting him back, and I gave him the right call. So we'll just give him here.
Short, I've learned an awful lot about the insidious and demonic aspects of the 12B6 as an instant threat for mass destruction of pro se complaints, which constitutes conspiracy to obstruct, deny, and discriminate against us from accessing substantial justice.
That's true. Anything going on with you, Chris? Have you been, oh yeah, okay, he dialed into the wrong PIN code, you guys. No worries, he's listening to the replay from last week, and he thought we were live. That's all right. He got on to the replay. He just scrolled a little too far down in the email. So he'll be with us here in just a second. Anybody get arrested in the last week, or what's going on? Y'all are good?
One of our associates, I think you know Benson, Tom Benson here in Las Vegas, he had a traffic stop, and he refused to give his name and refused to show his license because he wasn't operating in commerce or in a commercial vehicle, hauling passengers or freight for hire, and all he had was guests, had it on conveyance. And they called
Andy Ostrowski.
Oh, Andy, hooray! Our call
hey.
went straight through.
All right, well,
hey, I was dialed in on the wrong line, I guess.
Hey, that's okay. We know you were listening to the replay of last week, and it's okay. We're just so glad to have you on.
So Jim's not on tonight. Okay. I was kind of interested in what he was talking about there, about banning the bar out there. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're great. I've already laid out all kinds of information about you, and I gave out your Facebook info and your website. There's a lot of people on this call tonight, Andy, that want to hear your story. And I talked about you traveling around with Fraud Squad, and Dave Kofelt, he referred you, and you guys met in Denver, and he said you absolutely have to get this guy on the call. So here you are. We're so glad to have you. Welcome to 42 Action. And which is the whole premise is Title 42 lawsuits. So if you want, give us a little bit about, I've talked about you being suspended. Go into your story. Let us know what's going on. You've got the floor.
Yeah, I've got a heck of a story. And before I, get started with that, I mean, if you have any information on that fellow Jim that was on and talking about, I thought I was listening live. I'm really sorry about that.
That's okay.
But, really, because I am in the process of, I'm probably, within 2 or 3 weeks or so of submitting my application for readmission. And I think you and I talked about this a little bit before when we were talking about it. I'm in agreement that there's some serious questions about the control of lawyers and courts and law licenses and their real effect on this country and, the diminution of the rights of the individual in this country. But, I'm going to proceed with my readmission application and, I'm going to have a lot of fights because, I've done a lot of things. I've said a lot of things. I've sued a lot of people. I have a lawsuit pending right now against the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And I've been pretty vocal and pretty aggressive about the things that I've said about lawyers and judges in courts. But there are things that need to be said, and some of these things need to be revealed through the quote-unquote licensing process. And I call it my application for readmission. I don't talk about getting my license back because, one of the huge problems in this system is, and I don't know, I mean, that fellow Jim, he was talking about the Arizona situation, and, I'm in Pennsylvania. And we have, and I think it's pretty common in a lot of other states. I don't know how many of them there are, but we have a constitutional provision in Pennsylvania. It's called Article 5, Section 10C of the Pennsylvania Constitution that effectively, and it was just adopted in 1968, and there's kind of some strange circumstances around how it was adopted, but it effectively gives the courts the judiciary exclusive control over all things related to the judiciary to the exclusion of the other two branches of government. So it really is, it's a federal Article 4, small r Republican form of government issue because there's no checks and no balances on the judiciary in Pennsylvania, and they have complete control and authority over attorneys' licenses. And the effect of that is, Randy, that any time, and this is across the country, but my experience is Pennsylvania, so I'll speak of Pennsylvania. Any time somebody out there hires a lawyer, they are effectively compromising their own constitutional rights because a lawyer is not as free to speak for a whole host of reasons. A lot of them are more kind of psychological and philosophical reasons, but a lawyer is not as free to speak as the person is representing themselves. So what happens is, they want everybody to get a lawyer, but really, I've read or heard about some statistics that only approximately 35 to 40% of people with legal cases can even afford to get a lawyer. So there's 60 to 70% of people out there representing themselves, and while they are freer to say and do things, they create the practice, the legal environment, the rules of procedure and things like that to really abuse pro se litigants out there. And, there's some very, very, very serious problems in this court system in this country. I believe it is the heart of, why we're experiencing the incremental loss of our rights in this country, and it needs some serious reforms. And I don't know, I missed the introduction of me. I was on, right at 7:59, so I try to be timely, and I feel bad about that. But I don't know how much you covered. But I ran for United States Congress here in the 11th Congressional District in Pennsylvania last year, and one of the primary reasons I ran is because we need in this country to start talking about this issue with the courts. And it does not get covered in the mainstream press, and it does not get covered in the mainstream media or the mainstream political circles at all. And, I really think that, it's a difficult thing because, the vast majority of people out there, of the 315 or 20 million Americans, never step foot into the courtroom. However, the courts have such an impact on culture and society in ways that affect these people without ever stepping into the courtroom. So, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And I started seeing it through my own experience as a civil rights lawyer. You've got your 42 Action website, and I was a Title 42 lawyer. I've handled cases. I've handled dozens of cases under Title 7 of 42, which are the employment discrimination cases, and just as many under 42 Section 1983, which is the violation of rights under color of law. And, my Section 1983 experience relates to everything from equal protection, which are, the discrimination violations, as well as whistleblower litigation, from police abuse and brutality to suing, public officials for whistleblower actions, to suing people, people who have had their homes wrongly taken. A lot of people in this mortgage foreclosure process seem to lose sight of the fact that when the courts get involved and the courts send sheriffs out to evict people from their property, those become Title 42 and Section 1983 actions, with the sheriff being the state actor. I'm kind of, just one more comment on the campaign, and then I'll let you kind of get me refocused because I'm rambling a little bit. But
no, you're doing great. Okay, go ahead.
We actually, and people, like when I started doing this and I started talking about the courts, I ran as a Democrat. I did that for access. I did it for a whole host of reasons. There was a seat available, and a little knucklehead by name Lou Barletta that was the incumbent in the position. And I just have some real distaste for this modern Republican Party and the whole Koch brother funded mentality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They all talk the same Heritage Foundation talking points, and I just really never had much of a taste of that. But people, I'd go to these, Democratic events, and people would be like, oh, you gotta talk about things other than the courts. You gotta talk about these other issues. You know, you need to start speaking the Democratic Party line and things like that. And I would go to events, and the way I was doing the campaigning is I was trying to say, we're having rallies at courthouses. That's where I want to meet. That's where I want to talk. I want to stand on courthouse steps and get people out there. And I would have, press people, media people coming up to me and looking at me puzzled, like, are you really going to talk about the courts during this congressional campaign? And I'd look at them and say, yeah, that's what I'm really going to talk about during this campaign. And ultimately, I just kept forcing that issue. I just kept staying on it. And, it got to the point where, we had a televised congressional debate. And during that debate, one of the questions was about court reform. And it was like, people didn't realize, how significant this issue was, and certainly don't realize how important it is to me, not because it's really a personal vendetta or agenda, but because I see the effect that these breakdowns in the judiciary are having on people all over the country. And that was a huge, huge victory in itself, just getting that question. During a congressional debate, I bet, and I'd have to go back and look, but I'd be willing to bet money that in a televised congressional debate in this country, that's never happened before, because nobody talks about the courts. And we also, you do these editorial board interviews with your local newspapers and whatnot, and one of the larger papers in our district, it's Scranton, Pennsylvania, the Scranton Times. Their headline in their paper about my interview was, court reform is Congress's top priority. And in the first paragraph of the article, I was talking about these common law grand juries, and I don't know if you guys talked about that much or are that familiar with it, but I started talking about that, and I got that in mainstream press. So, this issue, I got 35% of the vote or something like that. It was, I had hoped to get 40%. I really didn't have any illusion, that I was going to win. Although it's hard that when you're doing that, the competitive juices get flowing, and you start to think, wow, I can win. And I know I would have been 10 times the representative of the people than this clown. I hate to be so diminutive about it, but this fellow that I was running against would have been. But I didn't really have any illusions that I was going to win that election. But it was a huge victory because I got people talking about this issue of the courts, and it's a huge issue in this country. And, you can, in this modern legal climate, you can go out and make millions being a personal injury, slip and fall lawyer, ambulance chaser, whatever you want to call them, and you can live, a fine life and, get all the accolades, and everybody looks at you and and ahs because you drive a nice BMW or Mercedes or whatever. But, when you start going into court and suing government officials and, trying to bring whistleblower claims on behalf of individual American citizens, you become a target in this system. And I've known, my history, I sent you that link because I felt, when I started running for Congress, I thought, I'm not here. I got 700,000 people I'm asking to represent me, and I'm doing it with a suspended law license. And I just felt I felt duty bound to publish that on my site about my disciplinary history, because people would naturally have that question. And most people, in fact, I just had a conversation with a family member, my own brother a couple weeks ago, about, a friend of mine who was suspended. And I said, he didn't do anything. He didn't do it. And the guy, my own brother looked at me and said, look, you got to do something. You have to do something to get suspended, or, to have your license taken. And really, in my situation, I got some complex personal, issues that interact with my professional issues. But there are lawyers, and one lawyer in particular, a fellow by the name of Don Bailey, who I've worked with, that did nothing but tell judges that they were misbehaving and engaging in misconduct, and that's why they got their license. So you do not, and it happens disproportionately to civil rights lawyers. Like 85% of all sanctions that are administered through federal courts are administered against plaintiffs, civil rights lawyers, the people who sue under Title 42. And, the disciplinary system across the country is skewed, to really go after the guy out there trying to represent people in these difficult situations. So it's a fascinating area, and it is a huge problem. And, because the courts really, experiencing the incremental loss of our rights in this country, and it's because of the courts. And the example that I started using, and I was all over this right away. When that stuff happened in Ferguson, Missouri last year, people might have their feelings about the racial aspects of it and everything else, and that's fine. I don't want to get into that kind of debate. But the fact that, that I focused on immediately was, and people didn't get it, and they don't really get it when I say it. I say that is a court issue. That is a court issue because, our Congress enacted these laws back in the mid-'60s, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which Title VII, 42 U.S.C. Section 2000E is part of, as well as, the Voting Rights Act and things of that nature. And, when a Congress enacts a law, then it's to the courts to effectuate the intention of the legislature in administering these cases. And if the courts were working right, we would have been well advanced past the point of where we are now. But we're still having riots in the streets over these grand feelings of racial animosity and things of that nature. And I attribute that to breakdowns in the courts because. And the police versus the individual citizen. Let's not even make it the black-white issue. Let's make it about, police violating individual Americans' rights. When you go into court and you hear in Baltimore that city, they settled $5 million worth of lawsuits, over their police, et cetera, et cetera. Well, those are settlements. A lot of times these cases settle because it makes business sense for these insurance companies who are insuring the police to settle these cases rather than going through the expense of the trial. And you can get some good money, settling cases. I've settled, some of these cases for some decent money at times in the past. But you can't go through, the courts are the disciplinary arm of our government, meaning, when you have a fairly and properly functioning court system, it brings a discipline on the whole system. Where if a jury, if a federal judge allowed a case to go to a jury and didn't rig the case with skewed jury instructions and verdict questions and, allowed all the evidence to go forward, and a jury came back and rebuked one of these police officers in one case, at one time, if a federal judge stepped out and said, look, Mr. Police Officer or Mr. Police Chief or Mr. Police Administrator, you're not coming into my courtroom and lying. And I just can't, it's just, every single case that I've had, the lies that you confront. But my point is, a court with one strong rebuke in one case could go a long, long way to send a message that this kind of conduct is not being tolerated. But that hasn't happened. What happens is the legal system and the judiciary tends to protect the establishment, and the establishment is, the powers that be in this system. And they kind of, cover it over and allow it to go on, and these cases get thrown out, and it creates the impression that these cases are all bullshit and that people aren't, they're just in it for the money. And, as a result, we're not advancing on the line. We're not growing or maturing as a society in these issues of individual civil rights violations. And I attribute that to the courts. I don't feel that I was as clear as I've said it at times in the past, but I hope you understand my point. And with that, if you want to kind of direct or have any questions or anything, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, that was definitely a good, and I know you're flying through it because our time is it's ticking, the clock's ticking. I want to ask, because it's not very often that we get somebody like you who actually sees and is willing to discuss everything that we're going through. And, these civil rights cases, the Title 42s, the corrupt judges, you're traveling around with this fraud squad. Put in a plug for them real quick, because are they going all over the whole country? Is this just a one-stop shop thing?
Well, that was a group put together by Lisa Brumfield. I think right? Lisa?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she's done her Liberty Lisa thing and just has done some real admirable advocacy work. And she has, networked herself with some people in the Denver area. And actually there was a guy from Florida there and a woman who lives in California there. And I think there was someone from Wyoming or something, or Montana. Someone was supposed to be. I don't know if she made it or not. But it's, this was the first event. And, I have, through my advocacy work, I just so happen to be connected to, a wonderful woman who's become a dear friend of mine from Colorado who knew Lisa and put me in touch with Lisa. And, I said, sure, I'm willing to participate. So this was the first event this year. And, I really think it wasn't a huge thing. There were maybe 30 people total. But it was some really dynamic and, impressive and courageous people that got there and spoke. And, I was, I was thrilled with the input that I had. And, the people in this, people who really, pick up with these issues are really impressive people because it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to stand up and stand out. And, people are going out and unfurling banners out of courthouses and trying to expose corruption and things like that. So this was the first event, and it was just this past weekend, and I thought it was a great event. And I'm a big fan of Lisa Brumfield, and I'm a big fan of everybody that was there, and hope that we can do more of it. I mean, I'm connected with some groups back here in Pennsylvania, and it was similar, a lot of the similar content. There's a lot of, the mortgage foreclosure crisis or, and the role of the courts in that situation. And we also had a lot of people who deal with these domestic relations law, and in particular, the Child Protective Services or Children and Youth Services, depending on how your state does it, and the absolute abuses that go on in that system and how they're tearing families apart and how they're destroying children. And I've really become connected with a lot of those people. And, it's difficult for those people, and it really does take some courage to step out because a lot of these people still have, children and cases in the system. And they get out and start speaking about these things, and they risk, further separation from their families, further destruction of their children. And, so there were some of those people there as well. And, I deal with people back here in this area in the mortgage foreclosure and the domestic relations and the discrimination issues are important to me, the whistleblower issues. And, I would really like to start to really get some momentum with these things. We get some momentum, and, when I wrapped up my presentation on Saturday, it's kind of where I got to the point when, back here in Pennsylvania. I mean, I've been meeting and talking to these people for, a year or 2 years or so. And, we all know what the problem is. And, we can sit around and keep talking about it and I will. I mean, it needs to keep being talked about. But probably all the people on this line are probably much like the people I meet with here in Pennsylvania, probably much like the people that we met out with in Denver. We get it. We're all on the same page. We know what the problem is here. Now it's time to start looking to how we can act, how we can collectively start doing things and being proactive and, really getting these things out there because, a lot of times, I talked about filing lawsuits and things of that nature. And I know going into a lot of these things that a lot of these lawsuits that we talk about will not be successful through the courts. The courts will find ways to engineer them and throw them out and dismiss them and make you appeal, et cetera, et cetera. But that is not a reason to not do them because there is the political angle. I mean, if you want to educate people in the breakdowns in the system, then you keep showing the breakdowns in the system by using the system. And, I intend to, be a candidate for office again next year. I'm going to, talk about these things. I'm going to talk about the control of lawyers and courts in this country. I'm going to talk about the Federal Reserve System. I'm going to talk about, this corporate fascist culture that we have. And, I'm kind of tired of, I sit and I watch the mainstream news. I have my TV on when I'm around the house, and I have MSNBC or CNN or Fox on, and they're talking about, all these fringe and collateral issues. And, I don't think that, through the mainstream parties and the mainstream press, you're going to get people talking about these issues. But, if we do grassroots stuff like this, and I don't know how many people you have on your call, but, if we just keep connecting with people, and things are starting to change. I mean, there's a much grander sentiment out there that the country is going the wrong way and that the two-party system is broken and that the real issues that are destroying prosperity and destroying this country and tearing up the rights of the individuals aren't being talked about in this system. And, I think I ran a very credible campaign. I did it on like $11,000, and my opponent had $1 million. And if I ever started to get close to him, he'd have had $10 million if he needed it. But I ran a credible campaign. I talked about some issues that need to be talked about. And my intention, and I haven't made an official announcement, I guess, but I guess I'm kind of telling the world, hey, everybody out there, keep this secret for now. But I'm expecting to run as an independent for United States Senate, and kind of try to who I want to tap into is the Ron Paul supporters. Or the Occupy Wall Street. I mean, they just kind of disappeared. There's a whole bunch of structural reasons for all that. But there was when that Occupy Wall Street move, that woke me up politically. I started thinking, wow, those are some frustrated people out there that are really talking about the right issues in this country. So, I'd like to think that, I'll be the brand of candidate who would appeal to that. And I'm prepared to just, go right after the real issues that exist in this country. And to me, again, I tick them off. And the three main issues for me are Federal Reserve. We got to end the Federal Reserve, and just no bones about that. We've got to reel in this corporate fascist culture and world that we live in, which is kind of like an offshoot of the whole Federal Reserve thing, which is really the fundamental issue as I see things. And then the lawyers in courts and the control of lawyers over the judiciary and their impact, because honestly, these bankers, central bankers would not be able to do. And I can say some things that sound kind of, conspiracy theorist, or however you say that. I think that there's some kind of design to it, that these things are controlled through the courts. And that's how. How do these attorneys, when we walk into those courts, we look at them and we watch them railroad the little guy. I mean, you have the back office talks with these guys when you were really in the thick of it. How do they live with themselves? Do they ever talk about it? Does it really impact them, what they're doing to everybody? No, and I don't. There might be some that are sensitive to it, but how they deal with it. To me, it's a process. The term I like to apply to it is acculturation.
Drugs and alcohol, Randy.
Well, and the name's Andy, and I was going to say that too. I was going to say, and then because I don't think a lot of them even realize what they're doing. Honestly, that's my honest opinion of it. Like when you go into law school, and I'm speaking from my personal experience, you're awed by the system, and you really feel honored to be there, and you believe what you're told, and you want to try to, you think you're doing something noble and dignified. And, it's a slow process that begins back then. And then it often becomes a matter of just what happens to the mind of people who are driven by, this competitive, money-driven, materialistic, consumeristic world. You compromise your conscience incrementally. You turn a blind eye here, you do something there, where it just kind of morphs who a lot of these people are, where I really, Randy, I don't believe that a lot of them the deal is deliberate. I mean, I was kind of like an in-your-face attorney, and I don't know how I come across, but I try to be real decent and respectable, and I don't like conduct myself with a lot of anger or rage, or I might drop a curse word here or there when I'm telling someone how I feel about them, but I'm just kind of like so deliberate in these people's face, saying what you're saying. Don't you guys realize what you're doing? Don't you realize what you're doing? And you just. I really think it's a deeply subconscious psychological thing where they just build up defenses about what they're doing where they really don't even see it. And I just think it's a matter of, people at real basic and fundamental levels can be controlled. And, you got to understand when, these lawyers, they get out of school, you go through school and you're believing in the system, and then you get out of school and you've got $60,000 or $100,000 or $150,000 in debt, then you get married, then you got to drive your BMW, and you got to live in your, $400,000 house, and you got to, pay your country club fee memberships, and you got to go rub elbows with other lawyers and other judges. And I just think that they become subconsciously compromised and don't even realize it, So some of that's what happens to everybody. We get yourselves in these debt situations, and you got to care for your families. And then what happens is, you're in court, and, this is like the other, first of all, you're not as free because you're looking up at a judge, and this judge has authority over your license, and you see that judge abusing your client or somebody else's client. And, the analysis for the lawyer standing there is, well, I've got this one client here. I know this judge is totally screwing him right now, but, I've got 10 other clients with cases before this judge, and I've got, a tuition bill to pay for my kid and a car payment and a mortgage payment, and I'm just not going to risk it. I mean, I don't know if it's that deliberate, but that's kind of like the subconscious dialogue that they're having with themselves. So, they learn to turn a blind eye to it. And over time, you do it more and more and more, and you kind of, you numb your conscience to it, and then you, like whoever the fellow was that chimed in, they end up, going out and boozing or doing drugs and, compromising themselves. It's, this is real deep philosophical, psychological stuff that goes on, but that's kind of the analysis. And to answer your question, no, I really don't believe that. I mean, I think that there are some that know what they're doing, but I think the vast majority of these lawyers who are in there, behind banks, taking people's homes without giving them due process and violating people's rights and representing lying, thieving police officers, they're just doing their job. And they just are able to turn it off. There's some switch flipped inside of them long ago, and they're just going through the world like robots. So, but we got to keep educating them.
What about judges' oaths of office, things like that? Like half these judges don't have an oath. Does that matter to anybody?
Well, yeah, I mean, it matters to me, and I'm sure it matters to you, and it probably matters to everybody out there that's listening. But
yeah,
that is a huge, huge problem in this country. In fact, there was this one fellow, Matt Borland, Matt something, who spoke at this conference last week. Really, really impressive guy. I thought he was. In fact, I thought about him a lot since then. And he said that I learned this that in Scandinavian countries or wherever he was saying that. In past times, the oath, the violation of the oath was about the most severe violation, lawless act that somebody could commit. And, we have these lawyers and judges violating their oaths willy-nilly. Anytime somebody, a judge is allowing a bank to come into a courtroom, and when they don't even have to go into the courtroom half the time, and allowing somebody's property to be taken without due process of law, which happens all the time across this country, they're violating their oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. And I love that issue. I mean, to me, you got to remember, I got 17 years of experience as a lawyer, and I was one of them. I mean, I was never compromised where I always had, some base level in me of morality and integrity where I couldn't do dishonest things like that. But a lot of these issues, I was a victim of it too. I was brainwashed, for lack of a better term, and people started talking to me about this oath issue, and I was like, that's dumb. That's stupid. What do you mean you oath? Everybody takes an oath. You raise your hand, you swear an oath, you recite the word, etc. And I kind of lost sight of the importance of that issue, and I do think that those issues need to be gone after, and I'm going to use that as a launching point to talk about another issue. And you see, you can probably tell. And I don't know how many people you have listening. I don't know who's listening. I don't know where they come from, but you can probably sense that I really don't have much fear about talking about these issues, and I'm going to talk about another important issue, and I'm going to I'm trying to ease my way into talking about this during a campaign without, being branded as some kind of lunatic or something. And that's the control of secret societies in this whole mix, and Freemasons. And, I know firsthand that there are a lot of judges and that there are a lot of lawyers and that there are a lot of police officers who are Freemasons. And that's fine. People, they're fraternity brothers, this, that, and the other thing. But when you're, I have a problem there was a judge here in central Pennsylvania who's now a federal judge. He ran a campaign, and the first thing he listed on his qualifications or, his campaign materials was member of the whatever order of Freemasons he was. And, again, I don't have a real problem with people joining certain, sort of fraternal organizations or that. I was never one to do that. That's just kind of how I was constructed. I was never just like a go along to get along. But, they are taking an oath. they are taking an oath to protect their brothers and whatever. I mean, I've looked up and I've read the Freemason oath. It's pretty serious, the blood oath that they're taking. And how can they square that blood oath with their oath to uphold and defend the Constitution? And I know that there are other judges. We have some 33rd degree Masons on the federal appeals courts here in Pennsylvania. And I don't know, how they can square one oath with the other. So, I do think they talk about you cannot be a member of a secret society or have taken an oath to anything but the Constitution and be a judge. And, and I'm not just, my experience with this has come over time. And these things were not easy lessons to come to. And the process for me was, once I started in this civil rights thing, the first it was, you're getting these decisions from these judges, and you look at them and they don't make sense. But then, you're still kind of young, and, you think, well, I must be doing something wrong then. So, you try to monitor yourself a little bit more closely. And then you realize, well, wait a second, this is good cases. I can understand the facts. I can understand, well, I did very well in law school. I get to top my class, so I don't have any competence issues or anything. And then you start thinking, well, maybe it's this judge. Maybe the judge is just too busy, and the law clerks are writing these things, and they're just not reviewing them. So you go down that angle for a while, and you keep getting the same results. Then you start to think, well, it is this judge. And then you start, seeing it from other judges. Well, it's these other judges, too. And, it's not like something that I just jumped on the first time I got a bad decision. I started with introspection. I started, going down every path and trying to find every justification that I could for what I saw as real patterns of the denial of people's rights of access to the courts. Until finally, I just started talking about it. And I am not just, I've got a suspended law license now, but this is not just me being pissed off because I lost my license. When I was practicing, is when I started talking about these issues. And in fact, this had never came up, but I put in a brief, when I was a lawyer, this probably 10, 12 years ago. I had this case, just an absolutely clear First Amendment case, it's a whistleblower case, as clear as could be. And I wrote in a brief, I said, I have no choice but to start advising my clients that this judicial system is corrupt. Because I laid it all out, and I articulated it perfectly. And, of course, I never heard a word about that. But then all of a sudden, they don't pay attention to you coming right out and saying it. But then all of a sudden, I started getting a disciplinary action from this side, disciplinary action from that side, getting pressure here, pressure there. So, I started talking about this stuff when I had my license as a lawyer from the inside. And I think, and it's this whole mentality of, how limited your rights are when you're a lawyer, and I believe, and I would meet people. In fact, I had a couple people in my office. We started, some of these people who, I don't know if you're familiar, I guess you'd call them, for lack of a better term, kind of like the sovereign rights, the sovereign citizen people. Guys who came into my office and they were doing these their own promissory notes, things like that, trying to trade on their treasury. And they would come to me and look at me and say, well, you're a lawyer, you can't help me. You're a lawyer, you have a license, you can't help me. I was like, no, I can. I am willing to talk about these issues. I'm willing to change this from within. I do want to change it from within because I honor my profession. I love being a lawyer. I absolutely loved it. I loved being in the courtroom. I felt like I was performing an important public duty every time. But the problem is, because of the way this system is constructed with the judges in the court having control over lawyers' licenses, they don't allow that to happen. There are some advocates within the system that, they get to a certain point. But when you're in there and you're trying to fight for the rights of the individual, it means you have to, go toe-to-toe with judges and tell a judge that they're misbehaving or that they're doing corrupt things or dishonest things. And when you start to do that, then they find ways to, make you do it on the outside because they figure as long as they have control of what's going on in the system. And this is another dimension of this thing that is a huge, huge obstacle in all of this. Here's all of us, the 300 million Americans, or whatever percentage of them have some level of schooling. 200 million Americans have learned, in the third grade that we've got the greatest system of justice ever created on the face of the earth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that becomes, they learn that when they're, 9 and 10 years old. And that, gets instilled with them at that point. and then they go through their whole life with that being their operating presumption, and they have never had any reason to change it. And the vast, vast majority of people out there never step foot in the courtroom. So they have no reason at the age of 50 or 60 years old, having no experience, to believe anything other than what they were taught when they were 9 or 10 years old. So, and a lot of people, the courts, people get personal injury verdicts, and, people get, they get dismissals on criminal charges or whatnot. So, a lot of people, when they hear that these courts are bad, their first instinct is, well, this guy's just a malcontent, or, he's just, a conspiracy nut, or, he's just thinking it's not fair, or whatever. So, the number of us, even though I venture to guess that, probably everybody that's listening to this call is like, yeah, man, this guy is right on the money. But that's why they're listening to your call, because they get it.
They do.
And we as a group of people do realize, and I said this, the other day, Randy, you could know 20,000 people, and 10 other people on this call can know 20,000 people, and that's still only, a couple 100,000 people. We've got millions of people's minds that we need to change on this stuff. So we're a very, as serious as we all know these issues are, we're still a very insular minority on these things. But again, and it doesn't take a grand percentage of people to change, but that's the obstacle that we're up against here, is really educating the people outside of the system. That's what I, have decided my duty is. My duty is to help somebody who has never stepped foot in court in their life, who is never at risk of having, well, everybody's at risk in this current climate, but who just hasn't had that experience. But we've got to start reaching these people and finding ways to get them to understand what the issue is. And I think, one of the issues is, we've got to let people know and just be really strong that, the courts are the disciplinary arm of our government. And, you talk about returning to a republic and reeling back the size of the federal government, and even reeling back the size of our state governments. But what you get at the core is that this court system is indispensable to an effectively and fairly functioning country. And the courts really are the center of self-government. And, when people have disputes, you need to be able to go into a court and have that dispute, fairly and reliably resolved. And when they do that on a local level, then people in that community know, well, no, we can't do this because that court will, enforce this or do that or the other thing. And that's the disciplinary effect of it. So, these are really complex issues, and, I obviously have a lot to say about them. So if you have any questions.
Today, I'm going to open it up here in just a second. I know we're running short on time. But the people on this call that have cases right now that want to file a Title 42, is there hope? What about these 12? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay. The people that are on this call tonight that have, say, Title 42s, and they're all getting 12B6, what's their hope?
Well, their hope is, and I hate to be such a naysayer, but don't stop. First of all, don't stop. Keep doing what you're doing. I'll help in any way I can. I'm very limited in my ability, my access. Everything I do alone. But we've got to start finding ways to advocate for these pro se litigants. How can I give them hope? I would just say be persistent and be patient and stay with it, and just, care about these issues and keep talking about them. But I've seen enough. You're talking about, I have had so many cases, I should be, by any reasonable standard in this society, in this culture, I should be a multi-millionaire. Because I don't believe I ever filed a bad case. I believe every case I filed, I should have at the very least gone to a jury, and I believe could have won if they were fairly decided. But I've been 12B6 out of so many good cases in my life. It's sickening. So I don't know what to say to those people. If there's common themes and things that we can start talking about, and if you have a way to catalog these cases and organize them, I'd be happy to look at what I can and help out in any way I can. But I can say just stay with them. And, the thing when you go into court, you just, and you're all experiencing this, I'm sure. They'll find some way to throw it out, and it doesn't matter. It's just like, and there's nothing that you're going to do to prevent it. They will find a way to do it, and if you have every I dotted and T crossed, they'll find a misplaced comma, something. So I can't sit here and say, that there's a hope. The hope is, political reform, and, we've got to just get people caring about these issues and reining in these excesses and get people focused on these issues. But for every one of you out there who has a Title 42 suit that you're filing and proceeding with, you doing that is part of this fight. And that needs to continue to be done. So, it is awfully, awfully discouraging. I mean, I know it myself, from the number of people that I've had to hold their hands and go through this with, that, it's devastating because, when you're dealing with these, rights under color of law issue, I mean, these are the inherent inalienable rights that are endowed on us by our Creator. And when that bond between us and our Creator is severed, that is a pain and a damage and an injury that is very difficult to adjust to. And it's very difficult to get other people to understand until it happens to them. But all I can, the only words of encouragement that I can offer is, I got your back, if and when I'm down the road running for office, I'm feeling your pain and motivated by that and everything that I do in the future. And please don't stop doing what you're doing, because you need to keep doing it to, again, reveal the problems in the system. And this is, when we were going through this disciplinary effort with my law partner here, this Don Bailey guy, the theme was, can this system police itself? Can the judicial system police itself? And in order to do that, you've got to give it a chance to keep policing itself. I don't think it can, or discipline itself. I don't think it is a system that's capable of self-discipline. I think there's going to have to be some kind of political influence or intervention or change that's going to have to bring a hammer down on some of these people, and bring some of these people to justice on a grand scale. But until then, you've got to just stick with it. I can give you insight and advice and guidance as much as I possibly can, and I'm willing to as much as I can, but there's no magic bullet out there. There's no magic words, and a lot of people out there, I know that they're just clinging, just waiting on when he's going to say something that's going to, be exactly what I need. And there's nothing. There's not a magic bullet. I mean, there's all kinds of people out there selling you all kinds of products about, all you got to do is file this paper and say this and do this, affidavit or mandamus or whatever. And there is no magic bullet. It's just, we got to just have faith. Faith is a huge part of this. When we're in this system of justice, I personally, feel like I'm doing the work of God on earth, or trying to anyway. I mean, integrity in the judicial system is about truth and honor and justice and peace, and those are very divine concepts. And, you got to know that there are some dark forces in this world. These are often spiritual battles that we're involved in, and, you just got to stay with it. So I didn't offer anything of real substance there, and just did some cheerleading for you, but that's all I really have for you. And it's very honorable stuff that you're doing, and please keep doing it.
Good. Okay, so time's running out. I wanted to open up. We might have time for one or two questions. Who wants to jump in there?
Well, I'm game if you're up for it. Randy?
Go for it.
Andy?
Yes.
Sure.
Well, Andy, I've seen this pattern developing, and I've done some due diligence study, and I've discovered a document published in 2012 by Henry S. Noyes from Villanova Law, and it's called The Rise of the Common Law Federal Pleading, Iqbal and Twombly. Of course, Iqbal could also be the IQ of Ball, one might observe.
Those two cases are what they've done to really 12B6 everybody in this modern.
Well, actually, what's happened is they have intentionally disinterpreted these cases and proclaimed they say things which they absolutely do not say.
You're 100% right. I mean, the federal pleading standard is a notice pleading standard. It should not be difficult to file a document in federal court that gets you past the 12B6 motion. And
well,
you're right. Go ahead. I'll let you talk.
It should be void for vagueness doctrine, because the terms that they use are subjective, interpretive, not defined explicitly for the particular purpose that they're using them for. And thereby, if you have the competency and the knowledge to challenge them, in fact, I myself am filing a complaint. I did a motion to reconsider and recuse a federal judge on Rule 60B, abuse of discretion, for denial of, when you are pre-trial, pre-discovery, prejudicially denied justice when you've already petitioned for a Article 3 venue and a trial by jury adjudication under 6th and 7th Amendment guarantees, it is abjectly, according to Justice Jay, the first sign of tyranny is when a single man acting as a judge can unilaterally usurpate the rights of the people and judicially determine. That word determine, in fact, to me it says they're deter and they're mining, so therefore it's a reverse word. They're mining your document to find some critical little tiny defect so they can deter you from getting justice.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And just to the extent you have ongoing issues, there was some case law that went back into the 90s where they tried to impose a, quote, a heightened pleading standard on civil rights claims, and that's been firmly rejected. And this Iqbal and Twombly cases came out, I guess they were like in the early 2000s and mid-2000s, 2005 or something, where there was some language in there that gave a little bit of an opening to start expanding this concept that you've got to plead more than, bare bone recitals and legal theories and things of that nature. And I agree with you 100%. Those cases have been misinterpreted and they're being used improperly to, primarily cut off the rights of Title 42, Section 1983 litigants and other civil rights litigants. So it sounds like you're 100% right on the issue, and it is. They are undermining you to deter people from doing this, and that's why people like me and people like the guy I practice with, that's why they lose license. And in fact, there was an email that a fellow sent, a friend of my colleagues that said, well, a lawyer said, well, no, I saw what happened, and we have this in an email. I saw what happened with Don Bailey, and I'm not going to do that. And that's exactly the objective. They're trying to deter people from proceeding down these paths. And, it's up to speculation, and I've got some theories as to why they're doing this, what this control is all about. Why won't they let people have access to courts? But, and I didn't catch your name, but you're 100% on the point there, and stay with it. But, the judges, when you file these things, they're probably coming back and, 1 or 2 page orders out, dismissed, denied, and they just don't care. They just don't care. It's a crooked system when you get down.
Well, it's all deliberate indifference at the end of the day, right, Chris?
Chris is actually.
Too. That's another standard. Yeah.
Okay, you guys, I hate to do this. It's 9:00, and this is where we're cutting the call tonight because we're moving over to another call. And Andy, I'm going to extend an offer to you, and I don't know what your schedule is, but if you want to do this again, same time next week, and we're going to take it deeper if you're available, and I'll let these callers actually get you right on the top of the call if you want.
Yeah. Next week, I'm making a move next week, but I'll commit to that. I'll be able to do that. Yeah, an hour. Sure. Yeah.
Perfect.
I appreciate you having me on, Randy.
We loved having you on, and I'm going to pop you a text real quick. You may want to listen to another line. What's happening is there's another call that's going on tonight, and they have some sitting politicians, and I believe they're at the federal level, and they are disgruntled just like you, and they are pretty much whistleblowing just like you. They're talking about the things that are going wrong in this country, in the courts, in the laws, and the House, the Senate, you name it. And so we're going over to that call. This is where we're going to disconnect this call, you guys. And if you look at your email, you have the phone number, but I'm going to give it to you again really quick. I'm going to.
Can you text it? Can you text it to me? I'm not sitting here with something to write. Yeah,
I will.
Text it to me, and I'll try to hop on. Okay.
Randy.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me get this number out.
Sure.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Share my info with Andy, and he might want to know a little bit more about that. I'm happy to share with him if he is interested.
Okay, well, I'll get my information to Randy. She wants to get over to that other call now. Text me, Randy, please, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Andy. And Chris,
Thanks, Andy.
Okay,
Thanks,
you bet. Here's the phone number for the next call, which is 712-432-0075. 712-432-0075. The code is 300748 #. Again, it's 300748 #. If the 712 number is loaded and you cannot get into that one, they have a backup line, which is 559-546-1400. Same PIN code. 559-546-1400. And I apologize. I know you guys had a lot of questions and comments. We wanted to talk about individual cases. Hold on. And we're gonna hold him over for next week. Again, next Thursday night, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, same place. And does everybody have that number for the other call?
Yep.
All right. Everybody sounds good. All right, we're going to